side leg series that we're going to do consists of about 7 different exercises. So I'm going to do each one individually. They are all excellent for strengthening the leg, especially the outside of the leg, and also the buttock. So you'll need a head cushion, and we're going to do each one lying on our side. So come to lying on your side, and to begin with, get your legs in chair position. So the front of your shins parallel to the front of your mat. And then fold a cushion. If you've got a little 1-inch cushion, fold it in half. If you've got a slightly bigger cushion, you might not need to. But really what you're doing is you're putting the cushion between your underneath arm and your ear so that it keeps the neck on a line with your spine. Because if I don't have that there, my head is hanging down and it's putting too much strain on my neck. So the starting position is pretty much the same for most of them, with a couple of minor variations. So you're lying on your side, right on the hip. So I'm directly on this underneath hip. So one hip is stacked on top of the other. And then the starting position is with your top leg in line with your hip, at hip height, but also in line with your spine. So it's not forward and it's back. So my spine and the back of my leg are pretty much on a line. You get a nice feeling of being open here. If you have it slightly forward, you start closing in there. So you have this leg lengthened. Now what I want to do is I want to have, for this first one, you have the foot flexed, and it's like someone's got my ankle and is stretching my leg away from the hip socket. And what this does is it creates a little space between the underneath waist and the mat, and now I've got a nice long waist along the top. So I don't do that, I'm sort of banana shaped here and my waist is collapsed in. So you maintain this length the whole way through. So if you're not feeling it in your buttock, you're probably not creating that length. So just get that length back again. So the first one is the lift and lower. So come into this starting position, have your foot flexed and have that sense of your heel reaching away from you, stretching this leg from the hip. Your fingers can just be resting lightly on here. You're not pressing into them, and the shoulder stays relaxed. Keep any tension out of the jaw. So that's your starting position. From here, you're going to take this leg above the hip. Again, always lengthening through the heel. And you even lengthen through the heel as you bring it back in line with the hip. Try not to go below hip height, but come roughly at hip height. So you breathe in to bring the leg up, and you breathe out to bring back to hip height. Now, I'm going to have this hand out of my way. I can get much higher if I don't have that length, but you see how this waist is collapsed in. So to really work the buttock, to get the buttock muscles to work and not just the leg, I'll have my hand out of the way. I have to stretch through the heel. Now you can see nothing is changing here. Everything in my upper body is staying exactly the same, and I've really isolated this leg on its own without using the sort of body as a sort of counterbalance. So you breathe in to bring the leg up, you breathe out to lengthen back to hip height. Let's do one more. Breathing in, try and get that extra little bit higher each time, and then you breathe out to come to hip height. And then have a rest, and you should really feel the buttock working here. So you can always give it a little bit of a rub if it's working well, so at least you know you're doing it properly. So that is the lift and lower. The next one in the series is taking the leg to the front. So come into the same starting position as we did for the lift and lower, with the leg in line with the spine at hip height, and you start with the foot flexed, creating this space here, creating this length there, reaching through the heel. Now you're going to keep the foot flexed and you're going to bring the leg forward. Now you're not going to bring the pelvis forward. So if you were against a wall, your pelvis would stay on the wall, and you're reaching the heel away from your sit bone. And then you point your foot before you start drawing back, and you use the hamstring to draw the leg back in line with the spine, so you get nice and open across the front of the hip. It doesn't matter if you go a little bit further behind, but try not to stop just short of the spine. And then you flex to come forward, so reaching the heel away from the sit bone. Each time seeing you go a tiny bit more, you point and use the hamstring to draw the leg back. And all the time, by keeping this space between my waist and the mat by lengthening the leg away. So you come forward. I often think as if you're lying on the floor, your dusting a coffee table with the inside thigh. So you keep it at hip height. So flex to come forward, breathing in, breathe out, point to come back. Let's do 2 more. Breathing in, each time get a little bit further, think about lifting, taking the heel away from the sit bone, point, pull in your core all the time and draw that leg back. And then have a little rest. So that is the forward. The next one in the series is the leg behind or back. So you start with your leg in line with the spine at hip height. Now this time the foot is pointed, creating this space here. Now I'm going to take my leg behind here. Now what I don't do, I'm working from this buttock crease here, because sometimes what happens is people take their leg behind and they bring the upper body forward, and actually then you're not isolating the leg. So just work from this buttock crease, don't change anything else in your body, and take the leg behind. And the further behind you go, but keep on the hips, the more you'll work the buttocks. So you're starting at hip height, and then you go down to the floor and back up to hip height. And as you go down and come back up, don't let it start creeping forward. So make sure it stays right behind, pulling in your tummy here. I'm not leaning back, I'm staying on my side and going from the hip down to the floor, and this works the buttocks a treat here. So we'll do a couple more, all the time again lengthening my leg out of the hip socket, nothing else in my body is changing, and then we'll have a rest. The next one is the rectangles, and this works your buttocks a little bit more than the straight going behind when you just go up and down. So the same starting position, the leg in line with the spine at hip height and the foot is pointed. Now I'll go through the first one quite slowly. You take the leg behind, you then go down to the floor, you go along the floor forward in line with the spine and up to hip height. So you go behind, you go down along the floor, forward. Now when I say forward, it never actually comes in front of the body. Forward is just back in line with the spine where you started and up at hip height. And every time I take my leg behind, I don't bring my upper body forward. And then I go down to the floor, along the floor, back in line with the spine and up to hip height. Behind, down, forward and up. Behind, down, forward and up. One more. Behind, down, forward and up. Now we reverse it. So we go down to the floor. Keep along the floor as you take the leg behind you. Again, don't bring your upper body forward to counterbalance it. And then up to hip height and forward just back in line with the spine. So we go down, behind, up, forward. So nothing else in my body is changing. I'm not altering my upper body to help counterbalancing it. I'm isolating just the leg. I'm pulling my tummy in here. So down, behind, up, forward, always keeping that space between the mat and the waist by stretching that leg away from my hip. Once more, behind, up, forward, and then have a little rest. And if your buttock is glowing nicely, give it a nice little rub. The next one, which is the last one where we're working the top leg, is the circles. So starting position exactly the same, and the foot stays pointed, keeping this leg lengthened away. Now you're going to go in front of the body, down to the floor, along the floor, behind the body, and circle it around. It is slightly different from the rectangle because you are coming in front of the body. And it's, you think about this thigh bone just circling in the hip socket. So it's between the hip height and the floor, staying all the way down along as you go behind. So it's equidistance in front and behind. So don't go a lot in front and hardly at all behind. So go behind, a circle around, and a little bit in front. So again, tummy in, everything else stays still. You're just isolating this leg. So we do some circles in one direction and then we reverse. So try and stay along the floor as you come in front, and it's like you're going around a football, about that size. Tummy in, nice space here the whole time, resting my hands, and you get a really good workout in that buttock. So that's the circles. So now we come on to working the inner thigh of the legs. So the top knee can come onto the floor. If you find that uncomfortable, or if you have a bad hip, you can just put a cushion under your knee and have the hip raised up a little bit so it stays in line with the hip. But if you don't have a problem, then you can bring the knee onto the floor and you lengthen the underneath leg in line with your spine. Now here, you're not really going to have to be able to keep this underneath waist right off the mat, but don't stop pulling in your core here, pulling in your tummy. Now you're working the inner thigh, so from the inside of the knee all the way up the inner thigh. And we'll start with the lifts. So you're going to lengthen that leg just off the mat, and it now isn't going to rest on there. We're going to do some with the foot pointed and some with the foot flexed. So think about keeping the leg straight and lifting from the inside of the knee using all the inside thigh muscles. And it's like you're getting the underneath thigh muscle to meet the top thigh muscle. Again, I'm not putting any weight on this top leg or into my hand to stabilize me. I'm pulling in my tummy and I'm isolating my inner thigh. So I'm working all those muscles from the inside of the knee all the way up. And I'm not resting back on the mat. I'm coming just above the mat. So then we flex the foot. Now, careful the toes don't point down to the floor. So keep the toes, the foot sort of parallel. And think about lifting from the inside of the heel. Exactly the same. Don't be tempted to bend at the knee. So you're working the inside thigh muscles, getting the underneath inner thigh muscles to meet and squeeze the upper inner thigh muscles. So make sure the toes don't start dropping down. Keep the toes up. In fact, the foot ends up being parallel. And lengthen each time. Really work those inside thigh muscles. And then have a rest. So once you've learnt how to do the inner thigh lifts, or once you've got strong enough, then we can do just the inner thigh circles. So your foot is pointed for this, the leg again is just off the mat, and it's tiny little circles. Again, keeping your leg straight, and again it's tiny circles as if your thigh bone of the underneath leg is just circling in the hip socket. You can do some in one direction, but don't bend at the knee, and you can do some in the other. And again, this is really good for working the inner thigh muscles. So we've got the lifts and we've got the circles. And then you have a rest. And those are the inner thigh side leg series. I always end the side leg series with a nice side quad stretch. So you can either bring your knee up to your chest so you can reach the front of your ankle, or if you can reach here, then that's fine. But what you don't want to do is grab your ankle with your leg up because you twist at the pelvis. So I like bringing my knee in, keeping the legs together as near to each other as possible as I draw my heel around to my buttock. Now tummy in, hips stay to the front, shoulders stay relaxed, and I'm bringing my heel towards my buttock, and I'm thinking of that knee lengthening away. What I'm trying to do is I'm trying to get a straight line from the front of my body all the way through on a straight line through my thigh. And I'm getting a really good stretch here. So I'm thinking of reaching my knee away to the wall away from me, tummy in, shoulder relaxed. If this is very strong, you can release it a bit and then take it back. And then let's just hold it here. It's a really good stretch. This is one way I think you get the strongest quad stretch. And then you can release. So of course with that whole side leg series you do the other leg. So you'd come on the other side and do the set again. And you'll find often one side is easier than the other, and that will show up a discrepancy in the buttock muscles. Sometimes you're a bit tighter or weaker on one side, and then you can make sure that you even yourself up. So I hope you enjoyed. They're very good exercises.